It was almost 11 at night, and the world outside Emma Collins's house was quiet except for the soft sound of rain. The small town in Oregon had a kind of stillness that could make you feel both peaceful and lonely at the same time. Inside her living room, Emma sat alone with a half-empty cup of tea. The lamp beside her throwing a warm golden light on the pages of the book she wasn't really reading. Her son Ryan had gone back to college 2 weeks ago. And the house had felt different ever since, too silent, too still. She kept thinking she'd hear his footsteps, his laughter, his voice calling for her. But all she ever heard now was the ticking of the old wall clock and the wind brushing against the windows. The day had been long. She had finished her work early, made herself a simple dinner, and tried watching a show on TV. But even that couldn't keep her attention. Nights like this were the hardest. They brought back memories, her late husband, the years when the house was always full of noise, the sound of family and warmth. Now, at 47, she had learned how to live alone, but some nights reminded her of everything she missed. Just as she turned off the lamp and reached for her blanket, there came a knock at the door. It was soft at first, almost like the sound of someone unsure whether they should be there. She froze, listening. Then it came again, firmer this time, 3 clear knocks echoing through the quiet room. Her heart gave a small jump. No one ever visited this late. She stood up slowly, her slippers brushing against the rug as she moved toward the hallway. The house felt suddenly colder, the air heavy with curiosity. She pulled her robe tighter and walked to the door. "Who's there?" She called softly, not opening it yet. A familiar voice answered, low and slightly shaky. "It's me, Ethan." She blinked in surprise. Ethan, her son's best friend. She hadn't seen him since Ryan left for college. He used to come over often when they were younger, polite, respectful, always with that easy smile that made people trust him. But to see him here at her door in the middle of the night, that was something she didn't expect. She unlocked the door and opened it slowly. The porch light flickered, and there he was, standing in the rain. His dark jacket was wet, his hair damp, and his eyes, those soft gray eyes, looked tired, almost lost. He looked older than she remembered, though he couldn't have been more than 22. "Ethan," she said, her voice full of concern. "What are you doing here at this hour?" He gave a small apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Collins. I shouldn't have come this late. I didn't know where else to go." Her heart softened immediately. There was something about his voice, about the way he said those words, that told her this wasn't just a casual visit. He looked like someone carrying too much weight, like someone who had been walking for miles just to find a bit of light. Without thinking twice, she stepped aside. "Come in. You're soaked." He hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The warmth of the living room wrapped around him, and he exhaled as if he hadn't felt comfort in days. She motioned toward the couch. "Sit down, I'll get you a towel." As she went to the bathroom to fetch one, her mind was racing. Why would Ethan show up at her door so late? Had something happened to Ryan? Or was Ethan in some kind of trouble? When she came back, he was sitting quietly, his hands clasped together, his shoulders slightly slumped. She handed him the towel, and he took it with a soft thank you. She sat across from him, studying his face. He looked different. Not the cheerful young man she remembered, but someone older, quieter, with eyes that seemed to have seen too much too soon. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently. "Did something happen?" He shook his head slowly. "No, not exactly. I didn't want to be alone tonight." His voice cracked a little, and she could hear the exhaustion behind it. There was a story there, something painful, but he wasn't ready to say it yet. She didn't push. Instead, she stood up and said softly, "Let me make you something warm. You look like you haven't eaten." He gave a faint smile. "You don't have to, I know," she interrupted kindly, "but I want to." In the kitchen, she warmed some soup, the familiar scent filling the quiet house. It reminded her of the nights when Ryan and Ethan used to come home after basketball practice. Both starving, both laughing about something she never quite understood. She smiled faintly at the memory. Time had moved so quickly. When she brought the bowl back, Ethan was staring into the fire, lost in thought. He looked up as she set it down in front of him. "Thank you," he said softly. His voice was steady now, but there was still sadness in his eyes. "Eat," she said, sitting beside him this time. "You'll feel better." He nodded and began to eat slowly, the spoon trembling slightly in his hand. She didn't ask questions. She just sat there beside him, the sound of rain filling the quiet between them. After a while, he said quietly, "You've always had a peaceful home. I used to feel safe here." That made her smile. "I'm glad you did. You're always welcome here, Ethan." He nodded, but his eyes told her something else, that this night wasn't about comfort or nostalgia. It was about something deeper, something he wasn't ready to speak yet. For a moment, their eyes met, and she felt an unexpected ache in her chest. Not attraction exactly, but something softer, something like compassion mixed with sorrow. He reminded her of her son, of her own youth, of all the times she'd wished someone would knock on her door when she felt alone. The clock ticked softly. The firelight danced across the room. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside, a kind of quiet understanding began to form between them, unspoken but real. When she finally spoke again, her voice was gentle. "You don't have to tell me everything tonight. Just know you're not alone here." He looked at her with a faint smile, one that was tired but grateful. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins. I mean that." "Emma," she corrected softly. "Just call me Emma." He hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Emma." There was warmth in his tone when he said her name, a softness that caught her off guard. She didn't know what had brought him there, not yet. But something told her this night would stay with her, long after the rain stopped, long after Ethan left, as she watched him staring quietly into the fire, his face calm under the golden light. She had a strange feeling, as if the universe had brought him to her door for a reason neither of them understood yet. And when she finally went to bed that night, the sound of the rain was still in her ears. But so was the image of Ethan standing on her porch, drenched, quiet, and looking at her with eyes full of something she couldn't quite name. A look she knew she would remember for a very long time. Ethan sat near the fireplace, his hands wrapped around the warm mug Emma had given him. The flames flickered softly, lighting his face in shades of orange and gold. He looked calmer now, though a deep sadness lingered behind his quiet eyes. Emma watched him carefully, trying not to pry. But she could feel something heavy in the air, something he was trying to hold inside. The rain outside had slowed to a steady whisper, and the sound of it mixed with the crackle of the fire, filling the room with a strange kind of peace. She finally spoke, her tone gentle. "You can tell me what's wrong, Ethan. You came all the way here for a reason." He took a deep breath, eyes focused on the flames. "I was driving back from the airport," he said quietly. "I just couldn't keep going." His voice trembled slightly, and he looked down at his hands. "My mom, she passed away last week." Emma's heart sank. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered, leaning forward. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry." He nodded, not looking at her. "She was sick for a while, but I didn't think it would happen so fast. I flew out to help with everything, the house, the service, all of it. But tonight, when I came back to town, I couldn't bring myself to go home. I didn't want to be in that empty apartment." Emma's chest tightened. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that came from more than just lack of sleep. It was grief, deep and raw. She understood it too well. "You did the right thing coming here," she said softly. "You shouldn't have to be alone with that kind of pain." He gave a faint smile. "Ryan always said your home felt like a safe place. I guess I needed to feel that again." That simple sentence made her eyes sting. She remembered all those nights when Ryan and Ethan would sit in the same living room, laughing, arguing over video games, talking about dreams and future plans. Back then, everything felt simpler, brighter. Seeing Ethan now, broken and quiet, reminded her how quickly life could change. She reached out and placed a comforting hand on his arm. "You're welcome here, Ethan, for as long as you need." For a while, they just sat in silence. The fire popped and hissed, and the house seemed to breathe again, warm, alive, full of something real. Emma could see how hard Ethan was trying to hold himself together. He wasn't the boy she used to know. He was a man now, facing the world on his own, learning what loss truly felt like. He looked up at her finally, his voice quiet but steady. "You ever lose someone close to you?" She nodded slowly. "My husband. It's been almost 8 years now." He studied her face with a kind of gentle respect. "Does it ever stop hurting?" She smiled sadly. "Not really, but it changes. At first the pain is like a storm, loud, messy, impossible to escape. Then, over time, it becomes something quieter. It doesn't go away, but you learn to live with it. You learn to carry it." Ethan nodded, staring back into the fire. "That's what I'm afraid of. That it'll never go away." She wanted to tell him it would get easier, but she didn't want to lie. "Instead," she said softly, "it will change, I promise. One day you'll think of her and smile before you cry." That made him smile just a little, and in that brief moment, Emma saw the boy she remembered, kind, sensitive, full of heart. He took a sip of his tea, then looked at her again. "You know, you always made things sound better, even when they weren't." Emma laughed quietly. "That's what mothers do, I suppose." The word mother hung in the air for a moment, and she could see how much it affected him. His expression softened, and his eyes filled with tears. He was too proud to let fall. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, letting him feel it all. After a while, he spoke again, his voice lower now. "She was a good person. My mom. The kind who'd talk to strangers like she'd known them forever. She used to tell me that kindness costs nothing. I didn't realize how right she was until now." Akima nodded, her throat tight. "She raised a good son, Ethan." He looked at her, his voice shaking slightly. "I wish I'd told her that before she was gone." She wanted to reach for his hand but stopped herself. "Instead," she said softly, "then tell her now. You don't have to speak out loud, just tell her." He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. The quiet stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of emotion, shared pain, shared understanding. When he opened his eyes again, they were clearer. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins, for letting me be here. For listening, Emma," she said gently. "You can call me Emma." He gave a small nod. "Thank you, Emma." The way he said her name carried warmth, not romantic, but deeply human. It reminded her how rare it was to truly connect with someone, to feel understood without needing to explain everything. They sat there for a while longer, talking about small things. Ryan's latest classes, the weather, plans for the holidays. But beneath the words was something else, the quiet comfort of company. Fall on knowing that someone cared enough to stay up with you in the middle of the night. As the clock ticked past midnight, Ethan began to look tired. His shoulders relaxed, his face softer now. "I should probably get going," he said finally, though his voice didn't sound certain. Emma looked out at the rain still falling outside. "It's late. You can stay here if you want. The guest room is clean." He shook his head gently. "Thank you, but I'll be okay. I just needed a little peace before I went home." She nodded, respecting his choice. "Then take this," she said, handing him an umbrella from the stand by the door. He smiled faintly, taking it. "You really think of everything? It's a mom thing," she said with a soft laugh. As he stepped outside, the porch light glowed against the drizzle, and he turned back to her. His eyes met hers, and for a second, time seemed to slow. There was gratitude there. And something deeper. A quiet connection between two people who understood loss in different ways. "Thank you," he said again, his voice calm and sincere. "Drive safe," she replied, her heart full of emotion she couldn't quite name. When he walked down the path and disappeared into the rain, Emma stood there for a moment, staring at the wet pavement glistening under the porch light. She felt something inside her shift, a reminder that even in sadness, there can be warmth. As she closed the door and leaned against it, she exhaled softly. The fire was still burning in the other room, and for the first time in a while, the house didn't feel quite so empty. She whispered to herself almost without realizing it, "He's a good boy." That night, as she finally went to bed, the sound of the rain lulled her to sleep, and in her mind, She could still see Ethan's tired eyes. The way he looked at her with quiet gratitude. She didn't know it yet, but that night would stay in her memory forever, not because of what was said, but because of what was felt in the silence between them. The night had grown deep, and the rain outside had softened into a light drizzle that barely touched the windows. The fire in the living room had turned to glowing embers, spreading a soft warmth through the quiet house. Ethan sat on the couch, his shoulders finally relaxed, a blanket draped over him that Emma had brought earlier. The heaviness in his eyes had eased, though traces of sadness still lingered. Emma sat across from him, her teacup resting on her lap, watching the shadows flicker across his face. She hadn't expected to be sitting up this late, but something about this quiet moment felt right, calm, almost healing. After a long silence, Ethan broke it softly. "Do you ever feel like you've spent your whole life being strong for everyone else?" His tone was low, thoughtful. Emma looked at him, surprised by the question. "All the time," she said quietly. "You learn to smile even when you're breaking inside. People see what they want to see, not what you're really feeling." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's exactly it. After my mom passed, everyone kept saying I was strong. But I wasn't. I just didn't know how to show how lost I really felt." Her eyes softened. Being strong doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means facing it anyway. He looked up, their eyes meeting across the dim light. "I wish more people understood that," he murmured. The moment felt personal, not in a romantic way, but in that deep, quiet way to souls connect when they understand each other's pain. For a few seconds, neither spoke. There was only the gentle hum of the night around them. Emma leaned back, taking a slow sip of her tea. "You remind me of Ryan when he was younger," she said, smiling faintly. "He used to sit right there after a bad day. Sometimes he'd talk, sometimes he'd just sit in silence. I think the house gives people permission to breathe." Ethan's lips curved into a small smile. "It really does. There's something about this place, it feels like time slows down. It's because nothing rushes here," she said softly. "Pain, joy, memories, they all take their time." He looked around, his gaze softening as it moved over the old photographs on the mantel, the books stacked neatly beside the armchair, the faded rug that looked as if it had 100 stories woven into it. "I used to love coming here," he said quietly. "Your home always felt alive. I think I needed to feel that again tonight." Her voice was gentle when she replied, "You're welcome here any time, Ethan." The air between them shifted, warm, quiet, and filled with something deeper than words. He looked at her with gratitude, but also with a kind of respect that made her heart ache a little. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man trying to hold himself together in a world that felt too heavy. After a moment, he asked softly, "Do you ever get lonely here, Mrs. Collins?" She hesitated, then answered honestly, "Sometimes, but I've learned to find peace in it. Loneliness isn't always empty. Sometimes it's where you find yourself again." He nodded slowly, as if those words meant more to him than she realized. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. She smiled, touched by his sincerity. "And you're kinder than you give yourself credit for." The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the passing minutes. The firelight painted soft gold on their faces. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt truly seen. And Ethan, he looked like someone who had finally found a moment of rest after a long storm. As the night went on, their conversation drifted to lighter things. He told her stories about college life, how Ryan still couldn't cook, how their apartment always seemed to have a broken light bulb somewhere. She laughed, really laughed, the sound warm and genuine. It had been a long time since she had done that. Ethan smiled, pleased to see her happy. "You have a nice laugh," he said softly. She raised an eyebrow, amused. "That's the first compliment I've had all week." He grinned. "Then I'm glad I gave it." It was a simple exchange, but it carried something more. Not romance, but warmth. Two people from different generations, connected through kindness and shared understanding. After a while, the room grew quieter again. Ethan leaned back, staring into the dying fire. "You know," he said thoughtfully, Ryan always told me you were the person he admired most. He said you never gave up, no matter how hard life got." Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. "He's a good boy," she said softly. "He made it easier to keep going." Ethan nodded. "You made it easier for him to believe in people. That's rare." Her eyes softened again. "You boys gave me something to believe in too. Watching you both grow, it reminded me that love doesn't always fade. It just changes form." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression quiet but full of meaning. "You really do have a way of making people feel like they matter," he said finally. She looked away, suddenly shy. "I just try to be kind. It's all any of us can do." The warmth in the room deepened. The night felt peaceful, but charged with unspoken emotion, not romantic desire, but a deep, human closeness that came from being truly understood when Ethan finally stood. Stretching slightly, she noticed how tired he looked again. "You should rest," she said softly. "You've had a long week." He nodded. "You're right. I should head home before it gets too late." She stood too, walking him to the door. The porch light glowed gently, the rain had stopped completely, and the world outside was still. As he reached for the doorknob, he paused and looked back at her. "Thank you for tonight," he said quietly. "For the tea, the talk, for everything." Her voice was tender. "You don't have to thank me, Ethan. You just needed someone to listen. I'm glad it was me." He smiled, that same soft, tired smile from earlier, and said, "It meant more than you know." Then, after a small pause, he added in a low, honest tone, "You really are one of the kindest people I've ever known." She felt her heart catch at his words. There was something about the way he said it, simple, sincere, without expectation, that touched her deeply. "Drive safe," she whispered. He nodded, stepping outside. The air was cool and damp, the night sky heavy with clouds. He turned once more before walking down the path, his eyes meeting hers under the porch light. For a moment, time seemed to pause. There was gratitude in his gaze and something else. Something gentle, something real. Then he smiled, gave a small nod, and disappeared into the quiet street. Emma closed the door slowly, leaning against it for a moment. The house felt warm again, but different, alive, as if the echoes of their conversation still floated in the air. She looked toward the empty couch and smiled faintly. That night, when she finally went to bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Ethan had looked at her, not with sadness, not with longing, but with the simple, powerful gratitude of someone who had been seen and understood when he needed it most. She turned off the light and lay in the dark, listening to the distant sound of raindrops returning against the window. And in that soft rhythm, she felt something peaceful inside her. A reminder that sometimes, even the briefest moments of connection can heal the quietest parts of the heart. The next morning, the world outside Emma's window was bright and quiet, washed clean by the night's rain. Sunlight poured through the curtains, touching the walls in soft golden patches. The house was still, but not in that lonely way it used to be. It felt lighter somehow, as if something invisible had shifted. Emma sat at the breakfast table, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee, her thoughts drifting back to the night before. She could still see Ethan's face under the porch light, the quiet sadness in his eyes, the way he'd smiled before walking away. It had been such a simple encounter, yet it lingered in her heart like a song that wouldn't fade. There was something pure about the connection they shared. Not romantic, not forbidden, just deeply human. It reminded her that even in loneliness, kindness could bridge the widest distances between two people. As she sat there, her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, half expecting a message from Ryan. But it wasn't him. It was Ethan. "Thank you for last night. I don't know how to say this right, but you helped me more than you'll ever know." She smiled softly as she read it. The message was short, yet it carried real emotion. She typed back, "You're welcome, Ethan. I'm glad you came by. Remember, you don't have to face everything alone." She hesitated before sending it, but decided it was the right thing to say. A few seconds later, his reply came through. "You're a good person, Emma. Your kindness gave me strength. I'll never forget that." Emma put her phone down and stared out the window for a long moment. The wind brushed through the trees, and she felt something warm settle in her chest. She didn't know what it was exactly, maybe pride, maybe peace. Whatever it was, it felt good. Over the next few days, she found herself thinking of him often. Not in the way a woman thinks of a lover, but in the way a person remembers a moment that touched something deep inside. Every time it rained, she would glance toward the porch, half expecting to see him standing there again, quiet, lost, needing comfort. But he didn't return. Instead, life went on. She returned to her routines, work, errands, evening walks through her garden. Yet every small thing seemed to remind her of that night. The sound of rain on the roof, the smell of tea, the glow of firelight on the walls. She realized it wasn't Ethan himself she missed. It was the connection, the rare honesty that had filled that space between them. A week later, she received another message from him. This one was longer. I went home to see my sister today. We talked for hours about Mom, about everything I've been holding in. I think I finally started to let go. You were right, Emma. The pain doesn't go away, but it changes. Thank you for helping me take that first step. She read it twice, feeling her eyes sting. It was the kind of message that made all the loneliness, all the quiet nights, worth it. She had made a difference in someone's life without even realizing it. Sometimes that was all people really needed, someone to listen, someone to understand. That evening, she went out to the porch with her cup of tea and sat watching the sunset. The world was painted in shades of gold and rose, and for once, she didn't feel the ache of emptiness that usually came with the end of the day. Instead, she felt calm, peaceful. She thought about how life had changed since her husband passed. The grief had softened over the years, but it had left a space inside her, a quiet place where understanding lived. Maybe that's why Ethan had come to her that night, because somewhere, life knew she had a heart that could hold someone else's pain without judgment. Days turned into weeks. And as autumn slowly gave way to winter, Emma and Ethan exchanged a few more messages, nothing too personal, just kind check-ins. He told her about the new job he'd started, about how he was learning to cook the same kind of soup she'd made that night. She told him about her garden, how the roses were still holding on despite the cold. Then one day, a small envelope arrived in her mailbox. It was a thank you card. Inside was a short handwritten note from Ethan. For the night you opened your door and your heart. I'll never forget your kindness. You helped me find peace again. Emma smiled as she read it, her eyes misty. She placed the card on her bookshelf beside a family photo, Ryan, her husband, and a younger version of herself smiling at the camera. Somehow the card seemed to belong there. It was another chapter in her story, quiet, unexpected, and meaningful. Years passed as they always do. Ryan graduated, started a family, and moved to another state. Emma grew older, her hair turning silver, her house quieter than ever. But on some evenings, when the rain began to fall softly outside, she would sit by the fire and think back to that one night. She could still remember every detail, the knock on the door, the look in Ethan's eyes, the warmth of the fire, and the peace that settled between them. That night had changed something in both of them. It had reminded her that healing doesn't always come from grand gestures or deep words. Sometimes it comes from simply being there when someone needs you. One afternoon, many years later, Ryan visited with his family. They sat together in the living room, sharing stories and laughter. Ryan's little daughter, Emily, was playing near the bookshelf when she noticed the old thank you card. She picked it up and brought it to her grandmother. "Grandma, what's this?" Emma smiled softly, taking the card in her hands. "That," she said gently, "is from a friend of your dad's. A long time ago, he came here one night when he was sad. We talked and he left feeling a little better. He sent me this to say thank you." Emily tilted her head curiously. "Did you see him again?" Emma looked toward the window where the rain had begun to fall, her heart full of warmth. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "But some people don't have to stay in your life to stay in your heart." The little girl smiled, not fully understanding, but sensing the love in her grandmother's tone. Emma placed the card back on the shelf and turned to watch her family laughing around her. For a moment, she felt that same peace again, the same quiet, gentle feeling she had the night Ethan knocked on her door later that evening. After everyone had gone to bed, Emma stepped outside to the porch. The night air was cool, and the rain had started again, light and steady. She wrapped her shawl tighter and smiled as she looked out at the empty path. "I still remember your face, Ethan," she whispered softly into the night. "And I always will." The rain continued to fall, calm and steady, just as it had that night so many years ago. And in that moment, Emma felt content. Not because of what had happened, but because of what it had meant. A reminder that even the smallest act of kindness could leave an imprint on a soul forever. She turned off the porch light and went inside. The sound of the rain following her like an old, familiar song, the song of a memory that never truly faded.